this is an incredibly interesting and important time in UK politics, and we're honoured and really pleased to welcome Jeremy Corbyn. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just about to say, if you get lost, you could Google it after that talk. Thank you for inviting me. It's a real great pleasure to be here. And I want to congratulate Carolyn on her first year as the CBI's first female Director General. Well done, all of you. And I have to say, my shadow cabinet has a majority of women around the table as well, because I believe very strongly in ensuring there's real equality of opportunity. This has been a challenging time for business, and Carolyn has shown great insight and leadership. And I'm also grateful for your invitation. And I'd like to reciprocate to Carolyn and your President Paul to the conference Labour is organising on the with our European partners in February. I've already given them a handwritten invitation to come, and we're going to be discussing how best to achieve the smooth transition through Brexit that Paul was talking about today, both for this country and for Europe. And I look forward to both of you attending that conference and making a contribution to it. 6 years ago, the CBI, TUC, and the Equality and Human Rights Commission jointly issued the Talent Not Tokenism report to promote greater diversity in business. Not only because it was the right thing to do, but because it's good for business. And thanks to those companies which have delivered real results since then. Now the TUC, under my friend Frances O'Grady, and the CBI are both led by women. I'd also like to congratulate Paula Nichols on becoming John Lewis's first female managing director. Paula rose from the shop floor and after 20 years ended up running the organisation. I know what that feels like. It took me 32 years to get from the back benches to the front benches in Parliament. But if you had told me 2 years ago I'd be addressing the captains of industry at the CBI annual conference, I don't know who would be the most shocked. All of you who are here or me. But we do have a lot in common, actually. As leaders, we all had to deal with enormous change and instability. And some of you have faced the odd challenge along the way. Tell me about it. I've faced a few challenges and it's enjoyable. However, personal thoughts aside, we now all face some of the biggest changes and challenges of our time. The challenge of your conference is innovation, growth and prosperity in a world of disruption. And there can be few bigger potential disruptions to the future growth and prosperity of this country than a mishandled and chaotic exit from the European Union. But before focusing on Britain's decision to leave the European Union, I want to reflect on the economic conditions that contributed to so many people across the country voting to leave. There were many reasons, but both Britain's decision to back Brexit and the election of Donald Trump in the USA are an unmistakable rejection of a political establishment and an economic system which hasn't been working for most people. It's a system that's delivered ballooning inequality along with falling or stagnating living standards for the majority. The UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon said, "Tackling growing inequality in rich and poor countries alike has become a defining challenge of our times." Real wages are lower today than they were in 2008. Andy Haldane, the chief economist at the Bank of England, talks about a lost decade in terms of pay. But those statistics and sound bites don't give the measure of the real problems that people face in today's jobs market. Over 6 million workers earn less than the living wage, more than 1 in 5. More than 1 million people are on insecure temporary contracts without full employment rights. Our shadow Work and Pensions Secretary, Debbie Abrahams, is currently working with the Federation of Small Businesses to look at what can be done to support the growing army of self-employed people whose earnings are no higher today than in the mid-1990s. Additionally, The gender pay gap is now locked in at nearly 20 pence in the pound. At the current rate of progress of closing the gender pay gap, it will take another 50 years to achieve total parity. And if you're a disabled person, you're nearly 3 times as likely not to be in work. That's why we've launched our Disability Equality Roadshow, to hear from people with disabilities in and out of work about their experiences and better inform our policy. I'd also like to highlight the great work of employers who take on ex-offenders. This is something that really benefits the whole of our society, so we recognise and nurture talent wherever we can find it. For too many families in Britain, increasingly insecure work means they cannot plan for their future, how to pay the bills, mortgage or rent. There are far, far too many people struggling to make ends meet because wages are low, hours are insecure and rents are too high. They're not just about managing, many are simply just about surviving. This is what happens when government and the economic model is relied on for a generation fails to deliver. What we've seen in Britain, the US and elsewhere is the rejection of a failed economic consensus and a governing elite which has not listened. This is a corporate as well as a political failure. And after the latest global wake-up call from the US, the need for a real alternative to a failed economic and political system could not be clearer. So those of us who want to see an open, tolerant, more prosperous Britain must make common cause in the battle for that future, the battle for the future of our country. It's a future that must be based on us working together to achieve social justice and economic renewal rather than sowing fear and division. Every business needs a plan for a stable and successful future. But following the British people's decision to leave the European Union, businesses have been plunged into a huge uncertainty by a government that doesn't appear to have any plan at all. I believe when it comes to government, there's bad intervention and good intervention. Bad intervention wants to name and shame you on the basis of how many foreign workers you employ. Bad intervention wants to punish you with a shambolic Brexit that limits our ability to trade with the world's largest trading bloc on our doorstep, just 20 miles away from Dover. As Karen has said, a Brexit deal without tariff-free access to a single market would close the door on an open economy. Bad intervention also covers an international trade secretary, and I'm quoting, so please don't attribute this to me, "You're fat, lazy and spending too much time on the golf course." I remember Labour's pro-business strategy in opposition in the 1990s was known as the prawn cocktail offensive. This government's attitude sometimes just seems plain offensive. After 6 years, the government's failure to invest in infrastructure and scientific research has put at risk our future prosperity. British employees are now a third less productive than American, German and French workers. Not because they don't have the drive, talent and spirit to succeed, but because this government's prioritised ideological cuts over investing in Britain's prosperity. Their absurd fiscal rule meant they treated capital investment like resource spending, like treating credit card debt the same as investing in a mortgage. Now, there's an opportunity for the new Chancellor, Philip Hammond, to change course and take the bold action necessary to support our economy. Last week, our Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, set out 3 tests that we want the government to meet. First, we need a credible fiscal framework that ends austerity and supports investment, crucial to make our whole country successful post-Brexit. To do that, the government needs to replace its failed fiscal framework with Labour's fiscal credibility rule, drawn up with world-leading economists to provide clarity and confidence in our approach. It would ensure we will only spend what we earn, but allows flexibility to invest for the long term in order to grow the economy for the good of all of us. Second, we need real support for those in work on low and middle incomes who will struggle as prices rise. the Chancellor can start by introducing the real living wage and reversing those cuts to low and middle earners through universal credit. Third, we need secure and properly funded public services. Our National Health Service is at breaking point with a 2.5 billion deficit, and social care in crisis with 1 million people not receiving the care they need, undermining those in work who sometimes give up jobs in order to care for people. The same applies to local authority funding, cut every year under the Tories. The challenges our country faces are very pressing. We need a government that is truly ambitious for Britain, not more cuts and half measures. Unfortunately, the Prime Minister's commitment today on infrastructure and research and development fails to recognise the gravity of the government's economic failure and betray a lack of ambition for this country. Our alternative is this. As well as a critique of what's wrong, Labour also wants to set out the path of a better way. That's about good intervention. In fact, it's intervention for the common good. Help not only for businesses, but for workers, young people, families, pensioners, for the country as a whole. Government supporting business and giving you the tools you need to improve the well-being and prosperity of our country and its people. And I see we have plenty of common ground with the CBI. In your submission to the autumn statement, you called on the government to invest for the future, prioritising measures that boost productivity and increase life chances across all regions and nations of this country. We couldn't agree with you more. So I want to set out the framework for a new settlement with business. First and foremost, a Labour government will prioritise investing in our economy. To support investment-led growth, Labour will put a national investment bank at the centre of our plan to rebuild and transform Britain. Our National Investment Bank will deliver long-term strategic investment in our underpowered infrastructure and provide the patient finance that our businesses need across the country. Who can be content with seeing the US and Germany investing in cutting-edge and green technologies while Britain lags behind? So we agree with the CBI in your call for this government to get going on major infrastructure projects. As well as delivering HS2, we desperately need to improve links from east to west across the north of England. And we cannot stand by while a shortage of affordable housing leads to suffering and insecurity for so many people and the damage to life chances of so many children. House building has dropped to its lowest level since the 1920s. So, Labour would fund a dramatic increase in the number of affordable homes to rent and buy in the private sector and by local authorities. Our country's history is based on individual ingenuity and also on collective endeavour. But Britain now spends less on research as a share of national income than France, Germany, the US and China. The next Labour government will support innovation by aiming to meet the OECD target of 3% of GDP a year on all research and development, a move also backed by the CBI. Last Thursday, I visited Airbus in Stevenage, a site absolutely on the cutting edge of the design and manufacture of advanced satellites and telecom system, building the ExoMars rover and the Rosetta space probe. But they're also investing in Britain's future by increasing the number of apprentices and doubling the number of graduates they've taken on this year. We're a country rich in talent and potential. We know that recruiting talented people with the right skills is a priority for business. That's why we're committed to a comprehensive national education service at the heart of our programme for government to deliver high-quality education for all throughout their lives, not just on leaving school and going to university, but later on as well. I would argue that this is common ground between us on infrastructure. Investing in people and skills, R&D and house building are all good examples of a common good intervention. Of course, businesses will need to contribute. It will mean some increases in corporation tax while maintaining one of the lowest rates in the world. But I see it as a sound investment, not only in your own business's long-term future, but for the common good of our country as a whole. The Prime Minister's suggestion that Britain should chase after Donald Trump in a race to the bottom in corporation tax to 15% or below, I think is reckless and short-term grandstanding. It would do nothing to bolster the long-term investment we all need, or to raise productivity or boost innovation, and would undermine the rebuilding of our economy in which our future prosperity depends. And we need to see genuine employee representation at board level, which the Prime Minister promised, but I see is apparently already backing away from it. As well as real accountability for runaway executive pay, we want to engage with you as we bring forward details to our proposals. Labour's common good intervention will see us make the case for Britain to retain full access to the single market and a stake in the European Investment Bank to support jobs, living standards and prosperity. And we back your call for a fair migration system that allows you to continue to employ skilled workers from overseas. We won't set false immigration targets or refuse to guarantee the right to stay for EU nationals currently working in Britain. But we will take action to prevent undercutting of workers' pay and conditions and insist that employers invest in boosting the quality of skills, training and apprenticeships at home. Good employers are also undercut by those who piggyback on others' investment or try to steal a march in a race to the bottom of low skills, low productivity and low pay. Far from being alternatives, economic prosperity and social justice are two sides of the same coin. We can, and I believe must, have both. The progressive policies of previous Labour governments helped civilise, industrialise, educate and deliver increased and shared prosperity. Government doing what all good businesses do, taking the long view and adapting to change. For too long, there was a damaging consensus that government just needed to get out of the way for business to flourish. That consensus, I think, has broken down. The CBI rightly identifies that we need more investment in skills. Government needs to reverse the cuts in further education and support business to deliver high-quality apprenticeships. And I hope in the autumn statement we will see two more things. The reversal of what would be the largest real terms cut in the school's budget since the 1970s and the funding for the government's nurseries pledge. We now need, more than ever, we need government comprehensively to raise its game on the challenge of Brexit. Its shambolic handling to date has fuelled uncertainty and is hampering long-term business planning. In 1963, Harold Wilson famously said, if the country was to prosper, a new Britain would need to be forged in the white heat of a scientific revolution. More than 50 years later, we now face the task of creating a new Britain, not just out of Brexit and a new relationship with Europe, but from the challenge of the fourth industrial revolution. We know the first industrial revolution saw mechanised production powered by steam. The second was powered by electricity. The third was driven by the internet and digital communication. The fourth industrial revolution is being powered by the Internet of Things and big data to develop cyber physical systems and smart factories. I might add that this industry, 4.0, was pioneered by the German government's own high-tech strategy. How we best respond to Brexit and the fourth industrial revolution will require a lot of radical thinking by all of us. It will challenge yesterday's received wisdom of private good, public bad. It will need common good intervention. We certainly won't be telling you how to run your organisations, though someone did point out to me that over the last 2 years, Labour has more than doubled its membership and paid off £20 million of loans and returned to profit. So you see, we're a successful business in our own right. It's all right, we're not joining the CBI yet. We won't stand back when there is injustice in the workplace or the boardroom, as we all saw with Sports Direct and BHS. All we ask is that for the investment we make for you, from building better infrastructure to delivering a high-skilled workforce, that you make your contribution to help the next generation of workers, the next entrepreneur, or the next business coming down the road. And in return, we'll clamp down on the people cheating our economy with aggressive tax avoidance and evasion by doubling the number of investigators to chase payment and ending the payment of excessive dividends to offshore owners. Aggressive tax avoidance and evasion is a burden and deadweight on us all, and we'll work at home and internationally to bring it to an end. If we believe in building a fairer and more equal economy, the indicators of whether Britain is doing well shouldn't just be economic growth, interest rates and inflation. The measure of a successful economy must take into account how our policies and businesses are helping tackle poverty, inequality and low pay, and how they increase productivity and protect our precious environment and planet. Labour's offer is to work together with business to develop prosperity for the whole country. We want everyone and every community to share in that prosperity in every part of the country. Under a Labour government, there'll be no more exploitative zero-hours contracts. We'll put an end to them. And there'll be no more poverty pay for those in work. We want to raise the minimum wage to £10 an hour by 2020. And we'll make sure businesses, including small businesses, are supported to deliver these goals in a sustainable way. We recognise the challenges of change. The challenge of Brexit and cutting-edge technology, especially from the gig economy, throws up both problems and opportunities, which is why I invite all of you, along with businesses across the UK, to get involved and engaged in helping us, all of us, to shape Britain's future. We want you to feed into our industrial strategy, led by our Shadow Business Secretary, Clive Lewis, to design an industrial strategy that meets the needs of 21st century Britain. It isn't about the old straw man of picking winners or pouring good money after bad into white elephants. Instead, we'll set the missions, put in place the right institutional framework and support, and provide businesses with the opportunities to develop our economy, provided, of course, that businesses live up to their side of the deal, on wages, on workers' rights, and on paying taxes. We want our relationship with business to be a partnership, Labour's new settlement for business. And in case there was any doubt at all, Labour has an open door for employers, innovators, and investors. And we welcome your ideas and advice. To ensure that prosperity is spread across the country, it's vital that the devolution of powers and funding must be delivered closer to businesses and the people that work for them. The north-south divide in income, jobs and pay is widening faster than ever. Last year, when jobs increased by 277,000 in London, they rose by only 1,000 in the northwest and fell by 40,000 in the northeast. Britain now has one of the most extreme regional inequalities of any country in Western Europe. We pioneered devolution in government, devolving power to Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, set up regional development agencies across England. We developed the Northern Way concept to improve infrastructure, trade and local government across the north. That's been scrapped by the Conservatives and the Northern Way, only to bring them back as weaker local enterprise partnerships and the Northern Powerhouse. And if we to get sustainable growth in post-Brexit Britain, then we have to maximise these collaborative partnerships. I'll give you an example. Hull, a city devastated by the loss of the fishing industry, has once more turned to the sea to find its future. The Labour Council, its MPs and government worked with Siemens to invest £160 million in Greenport Hull to build wind turbine blades to power the renewable energy revolution, taking place just off the coast, creating 1,000 jobs into the bargain. That's why our proposal for a national investment bank will be supported by a network of regional banks, publicly accountable and locally managed, with specialist knowledge of their areas. These regional banks will help break the logjam in the British financial system that has starved small and medium-sized enterprises of the lending they need to flourish. Labour will be on the side of the innovators, entrepreneurs and investors that our economy and our workforce needs. We will use public intervention to unleash the creativity and potential of entrepreneurial Britain. Labour is open. We're open to change, open to new ideas, open to working with you. In return, we ask you to be open to listening to the workforce in the boardroom as well as on the shop floor. Open to investing in Britain and paying a bit more corporation tax to make this country more powerful, more productive and fairer, so you'll get a return on your investment. And open, I hope, to working with us. Together, I'm confident we can rebuild and transform Britain for the common good, to create a fairer, prosperous and more sustainable country for all. Thank you very much for inviting me here today.